We knew that if we didn't fundamentally change our pricing and make it more simple, more affordable for our core base, that we just weren't going to survive. Yeah, maybe a dollar feels expensive for like these super low value questions, but the reality is that the value that Fin provides is probably like 25x, 20x in terms of ROI for most customers. And maybe you can split that out in a way that really matches the complexity for every conversation. But then you end up in a world where you've really complicated pricing that's difficult to predict, difficult to trust. And I think that the product management role is going to completely evolve to be more of a GM role, where PMs are not just responsible for solving customer problems, but also doing it in a way that's really viable for the business. At a fundamental level, a credit-based model should be that you have a centralized pool of money that you can spend towards different types of products or different types of outcomes, different types of usage. That's what a credit-based model should be, or is at its most fundamental level. But in reality, people use credit-based models. They add a little margin on top of the LLM tokens that they're running, and that's what they charge for. And what's really interesting in the world of pricing is that everyone has an opinion on what the pricing should be, and everyone comes to the table with a different set of context or trade-offs that they're optimizing for. And even though we've seen huge success with our outcome-based pricing, there's no perfect pricing model. It doesn't exist.
Welcome. I'm Ariella Bitran.
And I'm Vinay Seshadri.
This is Thank You for Vibe Pricing,
A new Charge Me series on the one thing we cannot stop thinking about:
AI monetization. For this first episode, we are thrilled to have Intercom's pricing lead, Aisling O'Reilly, with us. Vinay, you said something during the conversation that I think sums this up so well. Intercom is one of those teams that is quite ahead on this subject, and they have so much to share from their playbook.
Absolutely. I loved how they overhauled their seat-based pricing, deliberately risking millions in ARR. I love the research that went into pricing for FinAI, eventually leading them to pioneering the outcome-based model. Most of all, as a product guy myself, I love how they see both product and engineering being deeply involved on the commercial side. Did you have a favorite bit from the conversation?
I am not gonna lie. I love what she said about how credit-based pricing models, that we're seeing them everywhere now, are just cost plus in disguise.
Perfect. Let's dive right in.
To kick us off today, I would love to bring you back to a pivotal and maybe even like difficult moment when you were deciding Fin's very much value-centric monetization strategy. From your co-founder and CEO, we've heard things about how your pricing was messy and you had to take a bottoms-up approach to this pricing strategy. So I would love to hear a little bit about what are those changes that were made, and if in that process were any principle in your pricing strategy that came up and you're still holding truth.
Yeah, sure. So Intercom has had a very interesting history when it comes to pricing. We've gotten pricing very, very wrong in the past, partly from like evolutions in our company strategy led to us changing prices and adding a lot of complexity, but also just maybe a desire to over monetize or over intellectualize pricing led to honestly just a terrible brand reputation when it came to pricing. There were many memes about how bad Intercom's pricing were and how often customers would get like bill spikes and surprises. And so we knew that we needed to completely change our pricing, but it wasn't a case of it was really a like sink or swim moment. We knew that if we didn't fundamentally change our pricing and make it more simple, more affordable for our core base, that we just weren't going to survive. Pricing was consistently a top churn reason. it was just like it was very obvious that it was fundamental for the company's success that we needed to overhaul our pricing. The big challenge with that is that with more simple, more affordable pricing meant that the base of customers that we already had, we stood to lose a lot of revenue by then giving them all this cheaper, simpler pricing model. And so it took our CTO, Dara, who was leading pricing at the time and CEO own, to say, we're actually comfortable taking a significant loss here in terms of revenue to get our entire customer base on a simpler, friendlier model, with the hopes that it will, one, just like massively simplify and streamline our internal operations, but two, set the company up for the foundations of much stronger growth. And so that was a pretty long endeavor. We actually just finished moving customers over to the new pricing a few weeks ago. So about a year and a half between like rolling out the new pricing, testing into it, getting all the customers over. But now we're in a position where we have a much stronger brand perception in the market when it comes to pricing. The huge downs, like we originally thought we were going to lose $50 million by rolling out this new pricing. In reality, it was closer to 15 because, you know, when you're reaching out to customers saying like, hey, we actually want to move you on to like better, cheaper, simpler pricing, they started to spend more with us. So that's like a bit of Intercom's history when it comes to pricing. And the key like principle that we held there was transparency and simplicity for our customers. So like no surprises, just a ton of investment that that the team made there that we're quite proud of. But you asked about Finn's pricing. And so Intercom, we're one of the first to introduce AI agents for customer support. And that had been an industry that had predominantly been led by seat-based pricing. And even we had kind of like old gen bots that all operated based off of seat-based pricing. But I think when we started to see the power of Finn and just what it could do for customers, we realized that seats wasn't a very viable business, or like what we were putting into the market was likely going to cannibalize our seat revenue. And so we knew we needed to take a different approach. We just didn't know what that approach would be. And so we kicked off a lot of customer research where originally we were looking at conversation or more usage-based pricing. But at the time, I would say that AI agents just felt so new and unknown. There was such a sense that like, well, this might not work. And if I'm paying per usage, I'm going to invest all this time and money, and I'm still going to have to pay all my human agents to resolve these conversations. And so there was just really strong feedback from customers that this wasn't going to work with them. And so we looked to tie price and value as close together as we possibly could. And that's how we came upon this outcome-based pricing model, where we only charge you if Finn resolves the conversation. So that means that no human agents need to be involved in the conversation. And again, we felt like it was simple. We could transparently explain when you would or wouldn't be charged, and that it was really strongly value aligned. So they were kind of the core principles that stuck with us during our pricing revamp and during the introduction of Finn pricing.
That's great to hear. I mean, it's quite a story. Expecting to lose up to 50 and only losing 15 is all. I'm sure that made a lot of people happy internally. You did mention Dara, Ashlyn, and what most people don't know is how the pricing transformation was actually helmed by Dara, Intercom CTO. You don't often hear CTOs leading pricing transformations in large software companies. So that got me really curious. There's this old saying that you ship your org structure out to your customers. So I'd love to hear how the monetization team is structured at Intercom. How important do you think it was for Dara to be leading this effort? And how has the structure evolved since you transitioned to outcome-based pricing?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would say that it's one thing that's very unique about a founder-led company is that we're not, Intercom in general isn't very tied to functions or traditional organizational roles. We're much more focused on like individuals that can get the job done and putting the right people in the right places. Pricing was one of the top priorities for the company, and the reality is that our CEO Owen had very high trust in our CTO Dara. So I don't think that at the time there was a huge this strategically needs to sit with the CTO. It was more of a like a people thing. The reality is that Dara is super customer focused, has a very high tolerance for risk, and a real sense of like, I don't care what historical organizational structures say. I don't care if we lose some short-term money to hit these larger-term goals. And so he really just has the right personality for the job that was in front of us at the time. I do think that SaaS in general has benefited from seats being super low cost and high margin. And so there was the potential for your R&D function to be quite detached from go-to-market. And the reality is that in this new world where costs are so tied to or so much more constrained, there is a need for R&D and go-to-market and pricing to be a lot tighter than I think it has been in the past. And having Dara there to play that role has been really, really beneficial for us. And what's really interesting about outcome-based pricing is how it unifies the entire company behind a single goal. And so for us, if we want to win as a company, we want to grow our revenue, we need to increase our resolution rate. So the number of our customers' conversations that are fully resolved by Fin. And that type of unified goal across functions is really, really powerful. Having your CTO be primarily responsible for pricing, I think, is a really strong unification across go-to-market and R&D that we've really benefited from at Intercom. But I'd love to tell you it was a huge strategic move that we thought that far ahead at the time, but really, I think it was just the right people in the right place at the right moment.
Yeah. I mean, talking about resolution rate, tracking that, and I think you've also mentioned previously that, one of the big reasons behind the successful adoption of the outcome-based model was the fact that you were already tracking the success data pretty deeply. Now, can you tell us a little bit more, give us more specifics around that? What did that instrumentation look like? And why was it so critical for the charging per resolution approach to be successful at Intercom?
Yeah, I think the hardest piece of outcome-based pricing is being able to attribute the outcome that you have actually driven that outcome, and then actually being able to measure that outcome. And so a lot of companies, particularly AI companies, provide tons of value, but they don't always have visibility on the value that they're providing in a way that they can reliably and transparently charge for it. Customer support is somewhat unique in that regard, and so we even before we launched Fin, we were already measuring how many of these conversations are being resolved, and we had an internal definition on what a resolution was. That made it really easy to then go and test that with customers if they also trusted the same definition that we had as our internal definition of success, and made it much easier to roll that out to our customers. In terms of instrumentation, wasn't super challenging with our billing system. We were able to meter any sort of metric and charge that to our customers. So once we had a definition that everyone was bought into, it was relatively straightforward to bring that to market.
Yeah, in getting a little bit more into these outcome-based pricing model, you wrote something, and it was quite beautiful, and I'll read it here. You said prices are never a perfect match for every single customer for any pricing model. One person listens to one song a month. Another listens to 4 hours a day plus podcasts and audiobooks. Both pay the same $20 a month subscription. The real test is whether the model drives enough value overall, and we are seeing that plays out strongly with Finn. So I love this, and I would love to ask you specifically on this. What do you mean when you say these value overall? Because I see many times pricing teams or just streams across companies thinking that value-based pricing is this perfect pricing for every single customer. And in reality, like you're talking about this concept of value overall. So what do you mean about that? And what are some other maybe trade-off that you had to that you're comfortable you had to made for specific segments when you roll out the outcome-based pricing and at Intercom specifically?
Yeah, great question. So on the I think why I wrote that was someone was saying like, hey, $1 feels really expensive for me to say like, what's your refund policy, and for Finn to spit back out 14 days. Like, surely it would only take a human a couple of seconds to do that. Is that really worth $1 is our price per resolution? And first of all, Finn has very few of those types of one-turn conversations. Like most of the conversations that Finn has require a number of turns. You might need to disambiguate the question. You might need to collect relevant information to understand, well, like, what did they buy, to be able to understand what the refund policy is. And in often cases, Finn is actually doing work on behalf of the customer. So that might be, change my order from a size 8 shoe to a size 9 shoe, and Finn has the capabilities to go into customer systems to integrate to change that order shoe size. And so what I was trying to say is, yeah, maybe $1 feels expensive for like these super low value questions, but the reality is that the value that Finn provides is probably like 25x, 20x in terms of ROI for most customers. And maybe you can split that out in a way that really matches the complexity for every conversation. But then you end up in a world where you've really complicated pricing that's difficult to predict, difficult to trust. And particularly for new technologies, what's felt most important is being able to have something super simple and straightforward.
Yeah,
Well,
and staying on the topic of predictability, we spoke with Dara earlier this year for our state of recurring revenue and monetization report. And he highlighted the surprising challenge about outcome-based pricing that, predictability is getting in the way of usage, meaning that, it's very hard for support teams who are evaluating the software to predict how many AI resolutions they can expect. And it's a lot easier to predict the volume of tickets, for example, right? And he also mentioned that Intercom has been addressing this by giving away more pay-as-you-go pricing or having longer, more generous free trials. Now, can you tell us a little bit more about what kind of what, tell us a bit more about that challenge and what kind of impact it had on how you build the product and roll it out?
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of companies are struggling with in the world of AI pricing. The old way of seats was super predictable because for most people, they had a good sense of how many humans they were going to hire or what their headcount was going to be, which roughly translated to seats. With any sort of usage or outcome-based model, that cost is less fixed and more difficult to budget for. And so we've actually, I think we've approached that with 5 or 6 different ways to try and help customers better manage that cost. And I'm happy to talk through a couple of them. Yes, we give free trials, which I think is really helpful for customers. One, to understand the power of the tool that they're using, and two, to get a sense of what their resolution rate is going to be, which is helpful for predictability. But we've also had to do a lot of other things with our billing system to make that more predictable. Firstly, we introduced this concept that we call annual buckets. So instead of having to make a monthly commitment to Finn, and use it or lose it every month. Instead, you can buy upfront a bundle of Fin resolutions and burn that down over the course of the year. Really helpful where most businesses are seasonal and aren't going to get a consistent volume of tickets every month. And so that was a huge unlock. The other thing that we've done, which is completely different to what most competitors in the space do, most competitors will give you a discount if you make an upfront commitment, and then they penalize you for going over that upfront commitment. And so it might be $1 per resolution if it's on the contract, but then $2 if you go over that amount. And really what competitors are trying to do there is they're trying to get customers to commit as much upfront as possible so they don't undercommit. We've taken the exact opposite approach with Fin. We believe that once you start using it, you'll realize that it's, for most customers, it ends up being more powerful than they've originally anticipated. We don't want people to turn off usage because they don't want to get penalized for going over their contracted amount. We were trying to take the anxiety out of like picking how much you're going to contract for the year. And so if a customer has a discount, that discount is applied for the whole year for the amount on their contract, for anything that they use over the contract, or customers can just choose to pay as you go for the whole year and pay on a monthly or a quarterly basis. And so we've had to make a lot of investments like that to make using Fin feel more predictable, to help internal champions get the buy-in of the CFO, who naturally has that anxiety about spend. And in doing that, we've seen much higher trust in Fin pricing, and actually bigger commits up front, which has been really helpful.
Wow, you really were able to tackle all those potential friction points that are coming with outcome-based pricing in like very elegant ways. So keeping us a little bit on this topic, when we think about a pricing model, and we have like the value metric and the pricing model itself, and as much as they can be very much value-centric or elegantly planned, at the end of the day, there is a pricing, a dollar amount that our customers are seeing and your customers were seeing. So I'm curious because the per resolution price of 99 cents actually started, if I'm not mistaken, with $1.21. So I wonder what information made you go from $1.21 to 99 cents. And yeah, if you can also talk a little bit about how the product investment and making the resolution complexity even better, how that will potentially evolve that pricing.
Yeah, it's a great question. So when we first launched Fin, we did a whole bunch of willingness to pay research. We'd found that the optimal price at the time, I think it was actually closer to $2, and our cost was $1.20. And so we were like comfortable enough with those margins. Then we went to bring it to market. We found that customers were hesitant. We really wanted to like drive adoption in the early days. We were like the first to market with a tool like this, and there was a bit of like AI skepticism at the time, which thankfully is no longer the case. And so we decided to drop the price to 99 cents, which at the time was below our cost, which is kind of crazy, and it gets to some of the risks that I said that Dara in particular was very comfortable taking. But it was a bet that the cost of the technology would drop in time, and that it was the wrong benchmark to anchor to. We really wanted to like get customers in the door, get them to start feeling the power of Fin, with the belief that once they started, that they would just grow and grow in time, which thankfully has played out. One of the things that is really helpful with outcome-based pricing is that as we make the tool more powerful, our revenue naturally grows. And what I mean by that is when we first launched Fin, we only had Fin over chat. So we didn't have Fin over email, over WhatsApp, over any of the other channels that we had. And so as we expanded to those channels, we actually kept the price the same. And so really how we're growing our revenue isn't through constant price increases, it's through expanding the capabilities of Fin. Similarly, as Fin can now do more and more complex conversations, where we get that natural revenue growth, which has meant that we haven't always needed to lean into price increases. I would say that there's a couple of exceptions to that, where we've found that Fin provides outsized value over the phone. If you think of the cost to provide human phone support in any language 24/7, that's an insane cost, particularly for small businesses. And so in situations like that, we've looked at, or we've slightly higher pricing there.
This whole discourse on how AI upends SaaS margins is among the most interesting as well as the most divisive in tech today, right? And I think you brought it up earlier as well that in today's world, it's so much more important for product and engineering to be closer to the pricing conversation in a business, because the margins are getting compressed, right? So what is that transformation that you have seen? Like, have you seen any particular behaviors change inside product and engineering organizations, or artifacts or rituals that have changed to enable that transformation?
Yeah, I would say this is something that we're still working our way through. I don't think we've nailed this process yet, but happy to talk through some of the challenges that we faced and what we've implemented since. And so the remit of a product manager in the past had often been like, hey, just solve the most important customer problem, and like go to market or pricing will worry about the revenue. I'm oversimplifying, but like at a high level, I think we've seen a lot of that. And I think that the product management role is going to completely evolve to be more of a GM role, where PMs are not just responsible for solving customer problems, but also doing it in a way that's really viable for the business. Not that that hasn't happened in other industries, just in SaaS. I think seat-based pricing and margins were so high, there was a bit of a free pass on PMs needing to worry about that. And so that's like a new muscle or a new skill set that we've had to introduce into Intercom. And so the first thing is like actually just evaluating commercial awareness as part of our success criteria and expectations of a business. But also the pricing team is actually starting to work really closely with product as part of the development process, where we start to think through like what's the right budget in terms of cost to set for these types of features, what's the incremental value that it's going to provide, and putting that like responsibility on the product team to also feel a sense of ownership over the company's margins. A couple of examples of where this has played out really well, or like maybe a little bit embarrassing that we didn't catch these kind of things sooner, that might be interesting to share. We have a Copilot product that is like, standard Copilots in the right-hand side of the product, and it's like an AI agent that helps answer human agents' questions to make them better able to respond to end users who are writing into the company. When we first shipped that, we thought that we would need to give suggestions or prompts on what human agents should ask the Copilot, depending on the question or the ticket that they were dealing with. That was half of the cost of the Copilot product for us. And a couple of months after launching, we realized that less than 1% of people had ever clicked on any of the prompts or engaged with them. And so it took that one PM evaluating all of the costs, what were the cost drivers, and seeing that this wasn't providing value for the cost that it was driving for the business, with one simple product change, doubled the margin of that product. Right. So it's just such an amazing example of like, it needs to be a PM or someone that's close to the product that understands these drivers and understands the business or the customer value to be able to make those calls on what's the right trade-off. And yeah, I just think that's that is the type of attitude and commercial awareness that PMs are going to need to have over their product in this world where LLM tokens aren't free.
Yeah.
I have like 10 more examples like that, but I think that's probably the highest impact one that we've seen.
Yeah, I think you did mention another example of the voice calls, right? Yeah, you do treat them differently than say WhatsApp or email resolutions. And on that topic, were there any other kinds of considerations in terms of the different channels, the different services in the mix for these other channels of communication, WhatsApp, email, so on and so forth, that changed the costing, and then you had to go back to the drawing board? For example, did you do costing per channel before you decided, or?
Yeah, so we looked at it, and really there were two things for us that were the key. Should we price this differently or not? The first one is there a massive difference in willingness to pay across channels? And then is the cost to us sustainable across all these channels? And bear in mind that we've had this big push to keep simple, transparent pricing. And so across all the other channels, we actually keep the price the same. We found that the differences in willingness to pay weren't material enough to warrant like very nuanced channel-based pricing for Fin. And the cost isn't materially different either. We've slightly better margins on some channels than others. But the real one that is just a completely different ball game in terms of value delivered to the customer, cost to us, and then complexity to run the product is that voice channel. So I, I think what's really interesting in the world of pricing is that everyone has an opinion on what the pricing should be, and everyone comes to the table with a different set of context or trade-offs that they're optimizing for. And even though we've seen huge success with our outcome-based pricing, there's no perfect pricing model. It doesn't exist. And the sooner that I think the decision makers around pricing accept that, and everyone has a seat at the table acknowledges that like all you're doing is deciding what are the most important trade-offs for you as a business at the time when it comes to deciding your pricing model. That's all we can do. And so yes, there were definitely some advocates at the time of let's have channel-based pricing specific for Fin, and we decided that simplicity was the most important thing there.
Beautiful.
And if you think about like next step and evolution, when it comes to product growth, like we know the playbook when it was the per seed pricing, right? And how new lines of products were brought into the market, whether it was around pricing or packaging strategy. If you think about what's next, are you thinking about an evolution of the outcome-based model, or what are you, give us a sneak peek of what are you thinking?
Yeah. This is a hot topic for us at the moment. So I think there's a couple of things worth kind of like teasing out or calling out here. Is that oftentimes Fin does work that provides a ton of value that doesn't align directly with our outcomes-based or resolution-based metric. A couple of examples of that is like Fin does a lot of work today to help disambiguate the question, collect relevant information, and triage that to the right team. That saves human agents tons of time, and we know is really, really valuable. Today, it's not a true end-to-end outcome, and so we don't charge for that. And that's like a downside of the model. We may in the future look to like, and this is nothing that we're planning anytime soon, but like maybe there's a world where we charge per like assisted resolution or something like that. I could see that being a potential path. We also provide like highly sophisticated insights, tools, and advanced testing environments that are like completely differentiated from our competitors. We know there's willingness to pay for them, and there's a really high cost to us to run that. And so maybe one day we have some other sort of like mechanism to capture that value. So there's some like ways that the outcome-based model, while it feels great, it's super simple. The downside is we're not capturing some of this other value. Another thing is that today we have very deterministic rules for whether a resolution is counted or not. So it's that there was no human involvement in the conversation, right? Or like no human agent needed to intervene in the conversation. The challenge with that is sometimes people writing in on tickets, they just drop off, right? Like they move on to a different browser and they forget that they're having the conversation. And like if Finn is given an answer to the question, today we count that as a resolution, or we assume that like, hey, this person got the answer. They didn't say, thanks, that answered my question, which I don't either when I'm talking to an AI agent. And they leave. And we've like ran a lot of analysis on it, and in 99% of cases, Finn gave the right answer and the human left. But there's still that 1% where it's like, oh, Finn didn't really answer. Like when the customer looks at it and they're like, Finn didn't really answer the question. And so I could imagine a world where we run an LLM model over the conversation to understand like what was the customer sentiment. Were they happy with the answer that they got? Did they get the right answer? And that might like change our definition of success. Is it, again, nothing that we're planning anytime soon, but I could definitely see the market like moving to a world where AI is not just providing the outcomes, but also evaluating them in a way that customers trust enough to be able to be charged against it.
Those are some really fascinating insights, Ashlyn. I mean, one of the best things about talking to you guys in Intercom is you guys are you're further ahead in this journey than most SaaS companies, and everybody listening is going to learn so much just from how you guys are thinking about it. Now, you've been at the intersection of pricing and product for years now, having worked in LinkedIn before this, driving monetization strategy for their billion-dollar subscription business. Just a little side hustle. I've had the opportunity to work in the intersection of product and pricing as well. And the show itself is in many ways about that very intersection between the two functions, right? You did mention there is no right pricing, there is no right answer. It is a bit art. It is a bit like creative work there. And what I've been curious about is how can you turn that art into more of a science, right? What does that look like in terms of weekly, daily artifacts and rituals that are central to the process of being pricing PM, right? And how do you see this role changing as pricing agility becomes more ubiquitous and necessary?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things that I love about PM is that you're so close to the customer, right? Like a week doesn't go by where you're not speaking directly to your customers. And I think the exact same thing should be true of pricing professionals. And so we're blessed to have a great research team here at Intercom. We regularly speak to our customers about pricing. We use our own product to see what types of questions customers are writing in to our support team with about pricing. And so like on a very regular basis, we're close to the customer, we're getting that insight, we're understanding their pain points and like thinking about how we might tweak and improve them. I think that's just fundamental across both disciplines of product and pricing. It's nice to be able to like combine that, or to get that in both of those roles that I've had in my career. So I think that's like the most pivotal thing. The other thing that I think is really important is an appetite for risk and experimentation. And so oftentimes it's important to think about like what's a one-way door versus a two-way door. That's a question that we often ask ourselves. Like deciding to move our entire customer base to a new pricing model, that is a one-way door that needs like deep consideration, testing, model validation. That wasn't a decision that we took lightly, or a process that we undertook without deeply considering all the complications. But I don't think it's that challenging to like position a new add-on with a new pricing to a customer. You test with a couple of customers, you find it's really not resonating, the narrative's not resonating. Maybe you need to tweak the narrative. Maybe we need to tweak the price points or the pricing. And like to help inform that, we just stay really close to the customer, really close to the sales team, and monitor a set of metrics on a regular basis. For me, that's weekly. For broader stakeholders at the company, we have a quarterly check-in where we evaluate competitive movements, what we're hearing from customers, the metrics. And that helps us to set the roadmap for what we want to evaluate over the next few months between then and the next check-in. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does. It helps understand at least a few cadences, reiterating the point of being close to our customers and, seeking insight around particularly pricing, around support tickets, sitting in on calls. Definitely resonates, Ashley. Yeah.
Okay, great.
I will borrow that parameter when we run our own testing, one-way versus two-way doors. That's brilliant. It really, in our own experimentation, we should have that filter.
Yeah, it is so hard because I think people feel such high risk when it comes to pricing or like revenue generating decisions. That yeah, I don't know. I just think sometimes you just learn so much by putting something in front of customers and seeing how they react. We can theorize about it and run a million different scenario models. But at the end of the day, they're like educated assumptions, and until you like actually get something in market, you're not gonna know.
Right.
That
And that's
actually-
why you have such good results with the outcome base, even better than you.
That actually brings me to one of the topics we didn't really touch on over here, which is what is the role finance has been playing in all of this? I think one of the functions that's going to be most, I guess, hawkish about or dovish about making pricing changes is going to be finance, and then how do you balance that risk-taking appetite with a stakeholder like finance in the room?
Yeah, and look, I think we were fortunate to have very strong, open-minded finance partners. And so, for context, Intercom is split between Dublin and San Francisco, and we've got specific finance partners that are based in Dublin, close to pricing, close to R&D. And so, whenever we're releasing major new products or making new pricing changes, we work with them to help understand like what we think is going to happen. Our CFO is part of our pricing steering committee or decision making group. And like I think as a company we just have an appetite for like taking informed risks, and that is true of the finance org. I know in some companies there's like more hesitation, and in a previous life at LinkedIn, getting finance to agree to some pricing experimentations was definitely a more challenging part of the role. But I think there's just so much upside to play for. Sometimes I feel like people are afraid of making price changes or really charging for the value that they're providing in case they're seen as being like unfriendly to customers. But the reality is that charging more for a product that's giving more ROI and becoming more valuable just gives you more money to be able to reinvest in the product and start making it better. Like if we charged a fraction of what we're charging for Fin, we wouldn't be able to tackle the more complex queries or to be able to provide those powerful insights or to be able to give customers these advanced testing environments. And so I think oftentimes people need to change their mindset to like, yes, I'm charging more, but I'm charging more for the like value that I'm providing or the higher ROI that I'm giving, and that could result in like really important financial results for the company and for the product, ultimately for the customers.
I'm into that.
Yeah. I will bring you, Aisling, a little bit out of the Intercom pricing into just more AI monetization in general and what we're seeing in the market. I think that when it comes to outcome-based pricing, for Sam and the three of us, I'm sure we've read a lot about it. It's the future, and every company model should be emerging to become outcome-based. And then from some others, it is incredibly difficult, and it's going to be restricted for one type of, whether it's CX or the revenue recurring type businesses only. And in parallel, we're seeing things around AI credits becoming more and more popular. And you've said this before, and I fully agree with you that that's just like going back to a cost plus model, right? Which you've been so effective into bringing value as like the main variable. We've seen a lot of these cost-driven pricing emerging. So what do you think the future of AI monetization will look like? Are we going to emerge into maybe one or two models, or you think that it's gonna keep very much dispersed and variable? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it's a good question, and there's lots to it, right? I think credit-based models, there's a lot tied up in that, or it means something different to a lot of people. And so, like, at a fundamental level, a credit-based model should be that you have a centralized pool of money that you can spend towards different types of products or different types of outcomes, different types of usage. That's what a credit-based model should be, or is at its most fundamental level. But in reality, people use credit-based models. They add a little margin on top of the LLM tokens that they're running, and that's what they charge for. And so, like, I think the credit-based models that we're seeing in the industry at the moment are not liked by customers. Like, they're so common in the industry. We keep including it in our conversations with customers to see, like, is there anyone that actually likes this out there? And, like, people don't feel like it's value aligned. People don't know how to predict it, how to manage it. It's very safe for the companies that are providing those models. They've essentially taken zero risk in what they're providing to the customer. Not to come back to Intercom, but, like, for every conversation that Finn is involved in, we pay. Like, we take our cost scale with how often Finn is in a conversation, not how often it resolves it. So we're very incentivized, and we've taken on all of the LLM cost risk by having an outcome-based model. And the companies that are going with the credit-based models, that's not what they're doing. That's okay. But so I feel like the credit-based models will be short-lived. And when I say credit-based models, I mean the cost plus credit-based models. I absolutely see a world where we're providing credits, but it's outcome-based. And I don't know, like, for Intercom's example, maybe you phone credits and you have some text-based credits and you pay for that in a centralized pool. Absolutely see a world for that, and a world where customers would like that. But the key thing is that it's still value-based, and that we move away from this cost plus pricing, please.
Right. Yeah, fully agree there. I love seeing you interact with all these different sources discussing this topic as well. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
Yeah. And I think those are the questions for today's episodes. I really enjoy, I have so much taken away from this, but the success of your story really shows how you tackle all of those different potential risks in the model and turn it into a value to drive more usage, to drive better resolutions, and how it became an aligning function for all these different teams within your organization. I think that's one of the main takeaways, and how everybody's being driven by this pricing as the way they can improve their own functions is really fascinating. So thank you so much for sharing so much with us and with our listeners.
Yes, great to have you here, Ashlyn, again. And I love that you sit in the intersection of pricing and product, and you have a front row seat to how product is transforming, needs to transform, how engineering needs to transform and stay closer to the commercial aspects of the business. And that's an important message for anybody listening, anyone working in SaaS and software. It's really important to be more commercial, even in the R&D function. Thanks for sharing your story around that.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah.